Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello Miss Saidatun and all friend. We are from X7C class. Today, here our group from the 11th group will be presenting about the Romantic Age. And before we go to presentation, I would like to introduce our members. First of all, me, Dina Nuraeni. The second, Diah Kurnia Sari. And the last, Indri Ayu Lestari. And the first, the history of the Romantic Age in period 17 and 89 to 1832. The Romantic period lasts about 40 years, from the French Revolution in 1789 to the Reform Act of 1832. It is sometimes called the Age of Revolution, the American Revolution of 1776, and the spirit of liberty, equality, and fraternity of the French Revolution made it a time of hope and change. William Wordsworth, the prelude introduction, word bliss was it in that down to be alive. Bliss here is mean great pleasure. This shows the hope for the future when French politics changed, and many writers like Wordsworth hoped the same would happen in Britain. But the reign of terror began in 1793. The period of Napoleon followed rapidly, and by the early 1800s, most of Europe was at war against France. In literature, Romantic writing is mostly poetry. Wordsworth and Coleridge want a revolution too, in poetic language and in themes which contrasted with the earlier, the Augustan age. Then, the head controlled the heart. Now the heart controlled the head. For Augustans, feelings and imagination were dangerous. For Romantic, reason and the intellect were dangerous. In fact, the name Romantic was only given to the period later, when its spirit of freedom and hope could be recognized as different, as an important moment of change. In Europe, Romanticism was different. Music and art, politics and philosophy were all stirred by the Romantic spirit. In Britain, it was limited to a very poets, but they changed the face of English literature forever. Next, William Blake. William Blake had a very individual view of the world, and his poetic style and ideas contrast with the order and control of the Augustan world. Blake's best known collection of poetry, Songs of Innocence and Experience, was published in 1794. His poems are simple but symbolic. The lamb is the symbol of innocence, the tiger the symbol of mystery. And in this slide, we can see the example of Blake's poem.
Blake's later poems are very complex symbolic stakes, but his voice in the early 1790s is the one conscience of the Romantic age. He shows a contrast between a world of nature and childhood innocence and a world of social control. Blake saw the dangers of an industrial society in which individuals were lost, and in his famous poem, London, he calls the system of society Mind Forge Manacles. For Blake, London is a city in which the mind of everyone is in chains and all individuals are imprisoned. Even the river Thames has been given a royal charter so that it can be used for commerce and trade. Here's the example of Blake's poem. Wordsworth is the main character in most of his poems. He wants to see into the heart of things. As he says in lines written above Turnberry, Wordsworth writes frequently about nature and about ordinary people, such as the old Cumberland beggar and the least cleverer, who live against the background of the world of nature. Above all, Wordsworth wanted to show the importance of the human memory because it is the memory which continues to give life to our major experiences. Here's the example of Wordsworth's poem. Coleridge and Wordsworth worked closely with the poet Samuel Taylor Coleridge. They were both responsible for lyrical ballads and for the influential prefaces to the second edition, 1800. But they are very different poets. Wordsworth's poetry is more about the day-to-day, ordinary world. Coleridge's poetry is more about the extraordinary and supernatural world. Here the example of Coleridge's poem. John Keats was born in 1795, 3 years before Lyrical Ballads was published. But Keats also wrote about the nature of literature, the imagination and poetry, and his letters are important critical works. By the time of his death, at the very young age of 25, Keats was one of the most important romantic poets. Like Coleridge, Keats was interested in the irrational, mysterious, and supernatural world of the distant past. Keats wrote much of his poetry, both long narrative poems and the famous odes. The narrative are Isabella, Lamia, the Eve of Saint Agnes, have mythic, classical, or medieval backgrounds. Here the example of Keats' poem.
Next, Shelley poetry is similar to Keats' poetry same ways. They both want to capture the personal experiences, but Shelley writing is like Blake's, more political. In the poem Queen Maid, 18 and 13, he attacked the religion and moral of age, and in Uneasy, the necessity of atheism, 18 and 11, he stated that we cannot prove that God exists. And here the example of Percy's poem. Next is Lord Byron. Lord Byron was one of the most influential and for many is one of the most typical romantic poets. He was a great influence across Europe in the 19th century. His picture of the romantic hero, an isolated individual who attacked social convention and challenged the authorities of the age and who searched for but never find peace and happiness, was particularly influential. And here this line from Don Juan illustrates Byron's use of irony.
And the next is other romantic writers. Nature is a major concern of both from Robert's birth through all the romantic and on to John Clare. Clare is the least known of the romantic and in many ways the most unusual. He watched and described the decline of the agricultural countryside and himself suffered a mental decline, ending his life in a mental hospital. His description of nature are also often description of an individual personality who is anxious and uncertain. The Romantic period was also a time in which prose writing developed rapidly. Writers such as Thomas de Quincey, Charles Lamb, and William Hazlitt changed the style and topic of the 18th century essay and also create new forms in which their personal impression and the subject of everyday life were central. Thomas Love Pitcock, whose work was written in both the Romantic and Victorian periods, satirizes some of the main romantic ideas and lifestyle in novels such as Nightmare Abbey, in which the main characters are based on Coleridge, Byron, and Shelley, and Grill Grange. In 18 60. The most important novelists of the time were John Autism and Walter Scott. At his time, a number of novelists were women. The most famous of them was Fanny Burney, who wrote novels such as Evelina, 1748, and Camilla, 1786, about young women experiences of the society of their day. Maria Edward, an Irish novelist, wrote about the details of everyday professional life, and both Anne Radcliffe and Clara Reeve wrote Gothic novels which were popular for their exciting plots.
Okay, that's all our presentation. Sorry for our mistake and thank you for your attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.